Hey there, it's me again, Zikri Khalil here, all the way from Malaysia through the Asia, your host for today's ITMATTERS show, as always. It's been quite some time since we did a show. Things are getting quite heated up down here. But other than that, I wish all of you are doing well, recovering well, and finding means to go through this pandemic the best possible means. Today, however, I do have an amazing guest that I would love to introduce to all of you who are watching. Um, this brother, he wears quite a number of hats, so it's pretty difficult to sort of nail it down of who he really is. But other than that, I think you should know that he's not just only an investor, a creator, a speaker, and focuses a lot along the lines of exponential tech and trying to push humanity forward. He's a chairman of various entities from the Norwegian Refugee Council in the USA to the Silicon Valley Blockchain Society. Without further ado, please give a round of applause to Amit Pradhan. Welcome, brother.
Hey, very nice to be here. Thank you for that very kind introduction. I appreciate that.
My pleasure is yours. I take it that you're doing well. You're looking bright, shining bright like a diamond wherever you are. And I can't wait to pretty much indulge in your purpose. Just like I mentioned, you wear various hats. But could you perhaps tell the audience who is Amit Pradhan?
A fortunate person who gets to talk to people like you and your audience. So let me obviously start by saying thank you for having me. For those watching, thank you for taking the time out of your days to to listen in. Um, it's really interesting. I've had an interesting life. I've lived in on different continents. Born in India, grew up in Australia. I did my first startup when I was 17. We were acquired, came to the US, Silicon Valley at 21, 22. It was a really interesting baptism by fire. So there's a lot to who you become as a byproduct, obviously, of your journey. Um, but to me, the core question of who am I, who is Amit, became clearer, and I was able to get far more focused about who I was, more importantly, why I was about 5.5, 6 years ago. And I really thought about this idea of purpose over permanence. Why do we create what we create? We start out by creating what we create because of the social context that has been built around us. We're always thinking about creating wealth, having the nice house or homes, the nice cars, all of these things that are permanence driven. And in many ways, for me, it was about recognizing purpose for me. I come from a background of deep tech, both on the creation side. I also come from the finance side with venture capital. And for me, it was really the recognition that if I could identify my purpose, it would allow me to align the activities that I do. And like you said, I wear many hats, um, but I don't wear many hats in a distracting way, in a how do I divide my time kind of way. It's in an integrated, compounded way. So I arrived at a single sentence: who am I in the context of my professional being? And it was to invest, create, and influence in people and companies, or people and initiatives that create a net positive impact on humanity, and more importantly, the humans that we're designed to serve. And this is not just a pure philanthropy play or anything. This is how do we use exponential technology to affect the lives of billions of people around the world. And the companies that can positively affect the lives of billions of people around the world in a consistent, growing, scaling way will actually also return the most capital, because
Right.
they will have employees that want to work for them, customers and users that want to stay with them. And to me, it's less about the customers and the users. It's about the humans that you serve. It completely changes the way we think about opportunity. And to me, from a professional perspective, that is who I am and what I try and build for and stay true to.
Got it. Got it. I mean, thank you for walking through that with us. I mean, there's a lot of these appetite, I would say, in technology, whether they claim or whether they have supporting facts that their solutions is going to change X, Y, and Z, especially in pushing humanity forward, transforming the environment to putting it at the state where it should be. So, where do you think lacks here? You know, I mean, there's a lot of talk on the UN SDG goals. There's a lot of talks on ESG. There's a lot of talks also within the technology spectrum, but being in all of these various industries, from what I've seen in your resume, I'm sure you might know what is not really getting us to scale the larger wave at the moment. Do you have any idea on how you could shed some light on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think starting with the good news, right? There is this
Yeah.
massive shift towards whether it's the 17 SDGs, whether it's a shift towards the ESG model. Even public companies are now being graded on their the ESG scores. Two things have happened with that. One is there has been a shift in momentum. There's been a shift in conversation. There's been a shift in let's just say that the cultural shifts have started to happen. There are also generational shifts. So this is the good news. The bad news is there's a lot of impact washing and greenwashing because companies have learned the right words to use, right? And unfortunately, we live in a time where we're largely reacting to little sound bites, right? The attention span has become really short, and so if companies are using the right terminology and using the right words, they're getting away with a lot of greenwashing. They're getting away with a lot of impact washing. And the danger with that is that starts to become the culture on one side, and on the other side there is a lot of the honest industry that starts to get disillusioned. And so when you start talking to people to take them on the journey of impact, to take them on the journey of ESG, you start noticing that people are already starting to get jaded because they hear everyone talking about it and there's nothing behind it, right? Um, but the reality is, shifts happen slowly. We've often heard the term, seismic shifts, and in reality, seismic shifts, happen over a long period of time. We often say in Silicon Valley, every overnight success is 10 years in the making, right? It's just that you kind of end up feeling its big shift right at the end. And so, with all of these kind of warnings, with all of these, we need to be careful about the greenwashing of, initiatives around the SDG, around all of the initiatives around ESG. There's still wonderful momentum brewing. What one of the quick traits I would say is that I'm not sure if you've heard the term already. Maybe your audience has, maybe they haven't. It's the great big transfer. And what that is that $68 trillion of wealth are going to transfer from the last generation to the next generation, right? Whether it is large family offices, whether it is just wealth that is in large families, the next generation is now starting to take over that big wealth and run with it. And the generational shifts have been incredible, right? So if you talk to young millennials and Gen Zs, I'm a big fan, right? Because it's incredible the things that are important to that generation, right? The fundamental issues of equality, of climate change, of being better stewards of this earth that we borrow, of thinking about, racial issues, thinking about gender-based issues, thinking about, land, air, oceans, all of the aspects of the SDGs that we can bake in. These are common conversations for the next generation. And if the next generation is going to take over the control of the wealth, then you know they're not going to be investing in fossil fuels. They're going to be investing in hydrogen or other forms of clean energy. They're not going to be investing in the traditional forms of hierarchy and structures of male dominance or what have you. They're going to be investments in inequality and founders that represent and look more like the world we live in, not that world that used to dominate in the past. And so I'm optimistic about that.
I mean, I'm definitely optimistic about it as well. After hearing what you have just shared, it is paramount for me to kind of reinforce my beliefs that there is not just hope, but these mechanics that's already working. I think I think a lot of the audience and even myself were just a bit having a doubt that a lot of these are just shows for big companies to kind of dangle the carrot saying we are going for change, but you know knowing you and others alike who are deep in the other end, that there is these things that's happening. um, I think one of the things that I think is worth highlighting is, you mentioned earlier about your work on rainfall. What is the intricacies here, and what's this, why is that important for us to know?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm glad you bring up rainfall because it's an example of putting your money where your mouth is, putting your efforts where your mouth is. Um, Very briefly, the philosophical view of rainfall is that modern society has valued human life based upon physical land that you inhabit. And if you're lucky, what you find below, right? Whether it's oil or minerals or gold, and then of course what you build on top. And we've evolved from an agrarian economy to an industrial economy to the digital age to capital markets, derivatives, all of these things. And in all of that, we've ended up with the challenges that we face because 95% of the world's land is owned by 5% of the world's people. So the economic benefit doesn't spread to those who actually work on extracting that oil and the toil that they put in to create all of the labor for these different structures. The other challenge, of course, is that all of those resources are finite, right? And so we've got limited amount of fossil fuels, we've got limited amount of land, we've got limited amount of work that people can do. Um, but as we move to a postmodern society, the way I see this postmodern society is that we're going to recognize not just physical land, but digital land that we all inhabit. Look at what we're doing now. Your entire audience uses a smartphone. You're generating massive amounts of data, and that data should be your data. You should have what we call data self sovereignty because that has value. And what we did with Rainfall is we combined the exponential technologies of edge-based AI. So it's AI that lives, on your devices, on your watches and your rings and your phones, um, and is able to create value from that data, but while it still remains in your sovereignty, in your control. And Rainfall is able to take that the intelligence that it can get from that data without ever sacrificing your personally identifiable information and make that intelligence available to businesses who then compensate for that intelligence. And the earnings from that get algorithmically distributed back to where the data came from, right? And so the idea is that we can start creating a daily income for people around the world, whether it is people who have large transactions and you can spend eight, Swiss francs for a latte in Zurich, or whether it's Rashida, the refugee living in one of our, I sit on the board of the Norwegian Refugee Council, incredible refugee organization. We have about 10 million refugees that come through our camps around the world in points of, conflict. And Rashida, who's in one of the camps in, outside of Syria, is generating data points that are actually more valuable if you're designing the antibacterial, the antibiotic, the vaccine of the future, because her heart rate, her pulse rate, the amount of steps she takes, the density of people around her, especially in a place where there are injuries, people are coming with disease, um, the growth of new bacteria is more likely there than in the luxury of, Zurich or San Francisco or what have you. And so recognizing that we can capture value from that data and compensate Rashida rather than Facebook or Google or Amazon, or take your pick of companies, is the main purpose of Rainfall. And so to me, Rainfall is a put your money where your mouth is, because it's a representation of a company that can create massive global impact. It does it using the latest in technology, latest in AI, latest in IoT, latest in blockchain, right? And token economics on top of that. And at the same time, you can look back and say, is this fundamentally something that creates a net positive impact on the humans that it's designed to serve? And we spent a lot of time making sure that if we're projecting to the world what the future of companies should be like, the future of entrepreneurship, what do we create, what do we solve, let's not just make it theoretical. Let's show a model that can work, that has all of these tenets baked in. And Rainfall is something that I've been working on for years now, and this is the byproduct of that effort. But it's also a blueprint for anyone who wants to take and run with, what the future of building companies should look like.
It sounds incredible. In the first place, I mean, at one point it sounds like this could be the ultimate solution, unless someone wants to beg to differ. But where do you see um, the lacking of trying to get everybody on the same table to say yes, let's implement rainfall? I mean, I truly believe there's always some kind of you know economic agenda out there that will allow or won't allow specific new solutions to be implemented. But talking about yourself, I mean, like, where are we right now with rainfall? And if it were to really exponentially grow and push humanity forward, as the solutions has been put on the table from what you've shared, what is it that you need left to get it out there?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's always about adoption, but adoption is a complex, multi-layered challenge, right?
Of course.
It's about education. People need to be educated about why their data is valuable. They need to be educated about why it's important to have self-sovereignty over your data, control over your data. People need to understand why privacy matters, right? Because we take privacy for granted nowadays. In fact, we really don't have any privacy, right, in the world of Facebook and Google and the and Instagram and social media in general. But privacy is a critical thing, because if you live in America, or you live in Switzerland, ostensibly free countries, you don't think about what you say in the privacy of your home with a device listening. But there are countries in the world where if you say something against, let's say, the ruling party, you could be persecuted or prosecuted. And there are countries in the world where something negative can actually even lead to execution. So we have to start educating the world around the power of what they're generating, the power of their data. When we say data is the new oil, I go a step further. I say, data is the new nuclear fuel. It is so incredibly powerful, and if it's in the right hands, and we have control over that, then we can, not just create positive outcomes. We can have, an income that I refer to not as the universal basic income, which is like a basic income that everyone has, that is going to come from taxation or going to come from governments, as though somehow there's going to be this global um, agreement to do universal basic income. I call it the universal earned income, because it's not free. No one is giving it to you. It's not a donation, it's not philanthropy. You're earning it because the data that you generate, even when you go down, and whether you pick up a coffee or you deliver coffee for someone, there is value in those data points. And so the idea of the universal earned income is, again, something that we're trying to get the message out. So it's a layered process. We have millions of users that are already onboarding into Rainfall, But at the end of the day, you need to ensure that just because we think it's a good idea, just because we think this is fair and equitable and what future society needs, doesn't mean that the average person is going to see it the same way, unless they have the luxury of the education that comes with it. So it's an ongoing process. What I will say finally around this is what we have going in our favor to achieve the idea of universal earned income from data is is this concept called zeitgeist. It's a
Oh,
term that
yes,
I've heard before, right? Zeitgeist means
absolutely.
it's the sign of the times, right? And here's what I would say: we're starting to see generational shifts happening, right? I'll take 30 seconds to give you a quick set of examples. If you
Please.
look at Greta's representation of the climate change movement, you look at Black Lives Matter, you look at Wall Street bets. To me, these three are all protest movements. And then you have um, you know Bitcoin, you have DeFi or decentralized finance, you have NFTs, right? These are all also protests, right? I mean, Bitcoin is a protest against centralized control of a currency, right? DeFi is a protest against the banking system. Um, NFTs are a protest against the eliteness of art, right? They allowed anyone to start creating art and make it available to people who want to buy it. But these three are protest movements with the solutions baked in. More importantly, though, the way I see the world, I look at these six examples, and to me, they are separate vectors of the same revolution. I call it the commons revolution or the people's revolution. To me, we're at an unprecedented time of the commons revolution. That is the zeitgeist. The zeitgeist is saying, you know what? I don't want centralized command and control. I want to have a say in in the economy and the economics and currency. I want to be able to create art and sell it to whoever. I want to be able to invest in art that is driven by LGBTQ communities, or an indie artist, or an artist from Malaysia, or an artist from India, or what have you. And in all of this people's movement is the opportunity to recognize people's self sovereignty. And in today's digital world, that self sovereignty is best recognized by having self sovereignty of their data. And that is why I am very optimistic that the adoption cycle and the adoption curve is aligned now with the zeitgeist. It's aligned with the generational shifts that we're seeing. And to me, that is why this opportunity is more realistic right now than ever before in the past.
I'm definitely with what you said here. Like, totally. We've been looking at the signs, like, and like you said, these are unprecedented times where all these revolutions of various groups that has solutions. I think it's time for them, for the world to listen. But I think also there's this other group of people, from hearing what you're saying, it is quite of a big of a huge paradigm shift for them to accept. So, what would you say to these people who are still on the fence or still pretty not sure what to do with this information? On what can they do? What can they do more to accept that these are the things that's happening, and where can they do more in order to contribute and being on the right page of history?
Yeah, I think that oftentimes the approach that gets taken when we look at these transitions that are happening, and we're like, look, you're on the wrong side of history, right? Like, stop being a dinosaur, stop being
Yeah,
and we often end up calling them terms and names and labels, and the extractive capitalist, and the what have you. And I actually oppose that idea. My approach is, don't tell people what to do. Take people on journeys, because the human existence is a journey. It's not an end game. It's not an end goal, right? Life is a journey. And if I was to look at you and say, what your fund invests in BP, or Shell or Chevron, you awful extractive capitalist, shame on you, you're ruining the world. All I've done is put you in a box that you see labeled as the extractive capitalist, the evil one. The only choice you have at that point is to put me in a box of the extra woke, tree hugging liberal.
Right.
Two boxes can never meet, right? Two boxes
Absolutely.
can never go on journeys. So to me, the approach, and we do this a lot on the capital side, we do this with entrepreneurs, we do this obviously with corporates as well, is to just take them on journeys, show them the upside. The one example I will give you is, in a recent keynote I was doing to some of the world's largest venture capitalists, old gray haired silver foxes. You know I would look at them and say, when you look at someone like Greta and you look at the uh, climate revolution, that or the climate uprising, right? You get very angry at Greta because she's blaming you, because she's saying you have ruined it for the next generation, and you get defensive, right?
Yep.
As venture capitalists, you actually have only one job, and that is to find where the next big opportunities are and deploy capital because others can't see those opportunities and return phenomenal financial return on that, right?
Correct.
The climate revolution, if you can step off your, oh my God, she called me something chair, represents the most incredible opportunities going forward for future of battery technology, future of carbon sequestration, future of just so many things. So instead of thinking about, oh my goodness, what does this mean for us? Look at the opportunities it unlocks. When I look at the commons revolution, as I defined earlier, the commons
Yeah.
revolution represents an incredible amount of opportunities to invest in, right? DeFi is just one example of that, but imagine replacing the current centralized financial system. That is worth, you know, over, I believe it's about $110 trillion worth of opportunity that is right there, right? So are you going to worry about, hey, let's get into the dogma of anything, the labels of anything, or are we going on the opportunity journeys that all of this represents, right? And that's the way I see it, and that's the way I like to portray it, because instead of trying to take them on a moral journey, because morality is a subjective concept, right? Just because you and I think something is the right thing to do doesn't mean it is necessarily the right thing to do for everyone, right? And
Yeah.
and I always say, show me a tyrant dictator, and I'll show you a one-time freedom fighter, right? That's how most of the dictators have come into power. They fought for the freedom of some group, and look at what happened with power and transition. And so instead of getting into these moral discussions, it's much better to actually explain the opportunity, lay it out, make it available, share in it, and it is amazing. People will go on those journeys.
I mean, I totally get your point, and this is definitely something to digest and rethink how we think and talking to other people about it. That's 100%. I totally agree on that part, and I just want to thank you for dissecting every single thing and making things very simple for even myself and the audience to really understand these steps of where are we at and how can we sort of embrace this new common revolution, as you mentioned, which is a really cool name, by the way. I like that label, by the way. And time flies when we're having fun. But for those who are watching this or who are going to watch this, if you want to know about Amit Pradhan himself, I have done a bit of homework and putting all his credentials down there. I mean, not all, not his number, but feel free to link him up and follow him on Twitter. I think it'd be a great inclusion of having someone like Amit at your next conference talk or even your engagement. I definitely have someone in mind that I would love to connect you, Amit, especially in Malaysia, just to plug you in a bit and kind of add some refreshness to our holistic of thinking, because it has definitely touched a very strong tone in the way how I think on looking things, on exponentially growing humanity forward. So I want to thank you again, Amit, for having us on this show. Happy to keep in touch, and I wish you all the best in your future endeavors, and we'll definitely meet one day.
That sounds great. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. And yeah, I look forward to connecting with all of you. And can't wait. Once you're all opened up in Malaysia, I can't wait to visit.
By all means, man, my house, Mikasa Sukasa. So let me
I
know
will.
when you're
Thank
in
you.
town. Thank you, everyone. That's it for now, and we'll be right back with a few more messages.